What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Rivian stock, ticker symbol RIVN, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Monday, March 25th. Okay, guys, Rivian stock on Friday finished the day down 37 cents a share. That's minus 3.31%. It is essentially flat in the after hours. The reason I'm looking at that to begin with is because I'm interested in that volume profile in the after hours. When volume is as low as it was on Friday on Rivian, which honestly is going to be about 99% of the time on any stock, we have to take that with a grain of salt. Okay, the only exception to that is when the volume, at least what I look for in the after hours, meets or exceeds that of intraday. Okay, typically that's going to take a catalyst. Usually that catalyst is earnings. So let's get started here on Rivian, trying to pull out as much bias as we possibly can to give us insight heading into Monday, starting with our volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. My goal is 10,000 by the end of April. I think we can hit that with your help. Now, on the 5-minute chart, here's what I'm looking for. I need volume that has quick, or more so, I want quick changes in volume. Okay, I need those changes in volume to correlate with obvious moves in stock price. And I need that volume profile on those moves to be outside of what is contextual for that particular time of day. So here are the moves that I want to look at. Okay, there's really three. This fade off the open, that recovery, and then that fade that followed that recovery. All right, so let's take a look here from left to right. You can see here that we got a pretty normal fade in volume off the open. What we did see is a quick little spike in volume right near, here, let's circle that up, right near the bottom of intraday as we came into the intraday low. And what's interesting though is with one volume bar spike, especially on the 5-minute, for me, there's too much of a risk of fooled by randomness in that scenario. So I'm always looking for consecutive out of context bars. And we started to see that, however, it's mixed in with the intraday low and then the beginning of that recovery bar. So there's really, bears, I wish I had better news for you guys, but there's no bias, at least that I would be comfortable labeling as such, off that opening fade. Now, bulls, let's take a look at this intraday recovery. Now, a lot of people, they look at this and they say, if this intraday recovery went a little higher to the open, they would say, well, those two moves are created equal because we ended up net neutral. And in terms of price, we would have ended up net neutral, correct. But when you peel back a layer of the onion and start looking at the volume profile, you can have heavy bias on one side or the other. And then, to me, just because you ended up net neutral in price, those two moves were not created equal at all. Now, if you compare this recovery to the fade off the open, it looks to me like a pretty contextual fade in volume. However, if you compare that recovery to the fade that followed that, you got a pretty steep drop off in volume once the fade began. Okay, if you notice that. Listen, for me, it's just, someone might argue that if you compare these two moves, there's a slight bullish bias. For me, there's just not enough, and we have to remain unbiased. Otherwise, what are we doing here? So let's move on. Let's take a look at our self-fulfilling prophecy psychological levels that I'm paying close attention to come Monday. All right, now you'll notice here on Friday, we continued that pull away in the obviously downside direction away from these two self-fulfilling prophecy, very popular indicators, the 200 period, that gray line, and the 50 period, that white line. The 50 period is now moving downside at a rather aggressive rate, about to cross over 11. Listen, bears, what you guys want to happen on this 30-minute on Monday is to see that 50 period continue downside through 11, and any upside test, you want to see a hard high volume rejection in stock price, pulling backside away from that 50 period, maintaining that level as resistance. Whereas bulls, we currently find ourselves, as of the after hours closing price on Friday, about 1.6% away from that 50 period. I expect it'll be even a little bit closer come Monday, being that 50 period is falling downside. And since Friday was a minus 3.3% day, if we look at the 200 period, that's only a 3% upside move away. So bulls, best case scenario, is a reclaim of both of those. A good scenario would be a reclaim of the 50 period. Again, as always, on the break upside on either or both, or I guess the 50 period or both of those, you want as much volume as possible on the initial break. Any pullback and test, you want below average volume. Okay, that shows a fade in interest on the downside break. And then on the bounce, if you see a bounce, that's a confirmation of new support. Again, as much volume as possible. Big sample size, making that decision. Now, moving on here to the 4-hour chart, let's take a look. You can see that 200 period up there is not in play right now, but that 50 period very much so is. At least if you're looking at Rivian from a multi-day time frame, currently it's about 6.7% away. So really simple, specific here to the 4-hour bears, you want to see that 50 period continue to fall downside at an accelerating rate to get another psychological barrier as low as possible. That could help you guys on some continuation to the downside by discouraging some bulls buying into that level that they see as a psychological barrier potentially, right? Now, bulls, that being the case that we're below that, you guys would ideally like to see that flatten out to create as big of an upside gap as possible. Not really a gap in the way that you may be thinking when I say gap, like the whole fill the gap mentality. That's not what I mean. I mean, you want that 50 period as high as possible to give the stock as much room to run as possible before running into what a lot of people may see as a potential psychological barrier. Okay, now, the daily paints the most crucial picture. All right, so let's take a look at the daily. Come Monday, this is the real story that I'm looking at. This is the primary story because this is the one that has the most eyeballs. The daily chart is the most watched chart on the planet for almost all securities. So if we look here, now all these levels I drew for the month-to-month, the April analysis on Rivian. So these are all very important levels. Now on Friday, Rivian broke downside through that $11 whole number, psychological, what was acting as support. We now broke that to the downside. Now, you guys know, when I'm looking at big macro levels, I'm more of a 2 to 3 trading day kind of guy on a break. I want to see confirmation on a break for more than a single trading day. Okay. Friday was day 1 on the downside break of 11, so bulls, come Monday, I would love to see a reclaim of 11. Now, the same logic applies. On the reclaim, I want big high volume. Any retest, I want that volume to fade off, and then confirmation, I want the volume to flood back in. Okay, that's good. That shows a big sample size agreeing on 11 as a hold if that were to occur. Bears. Any upside test of 11, I don't care what volume it tested on as long as it were to reject off of 11 on big volume. And the real story, I think, for you bears come Monday, your ideal scenario is a downside test, if not break, of that 1055 technical level. And we know that when technical levels become more and more obvious, like 1055 is, they tend to become psychological levels, don't they? That's about 2.3% away from the closing price. Now, the expected move for Monday. Well, if we look at the chain here, the next expiration for Rivian is March 28th. Okay, that's Thursday. And if you look at the expected move by close on Thursday, it's plus or minus 77 cents. Now, if we look at the next few days, there's no like earnings catalyst or something crazy between now and Thursday, right? So if you take that 77 cent plus or minus expected move in 4 trading days, and just, if we look at it from a very primitive perspective, and we just divide that by 4, the options chain is essentially pricing in 19, 20 cents upside or downside per trading day. That, of course, you know, that logic, that 20 cent per day move would imply 4 red days or 4 green days in a row to reach that expected move. So the expected move day to day, if we end up seeing a mix of red and green days, which is obviously the most likely scenario usually, then the daily expected moves, typically in terms of volatility, ends up being a little higher. Okay, now we do all of the analysis to pull out directional bias. We look at the expected move to pull out volatility expectation. But we can do one more thing to pull out directional bias. If we take a look here, this is the chain from Friday. 124,000 total contracts traded, 72,600 calls, and 51,800 puts. So not only are we seeing a call side bias on the overall call put ratio, but what I'm most interested in, since this video is focusing on Monday, if we go to that short-term speculator category, the 0 to 20 delta range, 21,300 calls and 16,400 puts. We're also seeing a call side bias in the short-term bet category. Listen, guys, every single trading day for over 3 years now, I've been working with my Platinum one-on-one members and the entire group and sending out my scalp setup alerts, and then Gold Plus. I add into that my swing trade setup alerts as they come. The scalp setup alerts come every day. In play stock alerts, unusual options activity. That's how I've done that for years, well before I ever offered it in the gold server. That's how I kind of keep track of what the whales are doing. That's with Gold Plus UOA. And then, of course, my Platinum one-on-one group. Hope to see you join for Monday's trading day. Take a look at that link in the pinned comment. You can join at any time. If you got value out of this video for free, please subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one.